the workshop this week I have this handmade acoustic guitar, small bodied acoustic guitar. I'm not going to say who the maker is for reasons that I think will become apparent. In many ways this is a very nicely made acoustic guitar. Nice spruce top with well set purflings, and the rosette is well set as well. Rosewood back and sides with some nice detailing, ebony fretboard and a well cut scarf joint. But it does have one significant problem, and that is the intonation on this guitar is not good. So let's have a listen to it. So I'm going to play each string and then play an octave, and we'll listen and see what's happening to the tuning. So top E, so you can see on the strobe tuner, and probably here as well, that's going somewhat sharp. And the B string, quite a lot sharp. G string, that's probably pretty close, I would think. Yeah, quite close. Yeah, D string going a little sharp. A string is probably worse. Yeah, you can probably hear that's quite sharp. And then bottom E. Yes, that's going sharp as well. But a nice sounding guitar. So what's going on with this guitar? Well, let's start by establishing the scale length of this guitar. If I measure from the nut to the center of the 12th fret, I have a measurement of 315 millimeters. Double that to 630, and that is the scale length for this guitar. StewMac do this very handy online fret location calculator, and you put in the scale length, and then it gives you all the locations of the frets, in this case in millimeters, up to 22 or 24 frets. You also specify on the calculator whether this is for an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar. Obviously I specified this is for an acoustic guitar. And then what the calculator then tells me is the location of the break angle of the string at the peak of the saddle. So for the treble, that peak point, the break angle for the string on the treble side is 632.2 millimeters, and for the bass side 635.3. So in addition to the scale length of 630 millimeters, I need to add an additional 2.2 millimeters on the treble side and 5.3 on the bass side, and that's where the string should break over the saddle as it enters into the pinholes. But it's probably also worth adding that this location that they've shown here is a really good starting point to find the break angle for the string. But there are a couple of other factors such as string height or the gauge of strings that have been used that may have an impact on the best location for the break angle. So taking that information from the calculator and looking at this guitar, if we measure from the nut to the bridge, we can see that the center of the saddle is 630 millimeters, but the recommended break angle of 632.2 millimeters is just beyond the back edge of the saddle. And if we look at the bottom E string, we can see the rear edge of the saddle is at about 634.5 millimeters, and the recommended break angle is at 635.3. So it's in about half a millimeter, maybe a little bit more, beyond the back edge of the saddle. The owner of this guitar is well aware that the intonation on this guitar is not good, and so had a previous luthier look at this, and what they've done is try and shift the break point as far back as it can go by angling the saddle. So normally the saddles would be shaped so that the break point is either the center or the front edge of the saddle. Compensated saddles might be a little different. We'll come on to that later. But they've angled the saddle so that the break point is as far back on each string as it will go. But even so, the intonation is still not good, as we heard earlier. So what are the options now for improving the intonation on this guitar? One option is to remove the saddle and move it back maybe 2.5, 3 millimeters. But what that's going to do is expose bare wood at this sort of front leading edge of the bridge. That's going to look somewhat unsightly. So what I've agreed with the owner is that the bridge will come off and a new ebony bridge is going to be made, which will allow me to move the location of the saddle back to its correct point and improve the intonation of this guitar. So the next step is to get the strings off and start the process of removing this bridge. The first step to removing this bridge is to warm it up, heat it up, and that'll transfer heat through the bridge into the glue that has been used to hold the bridge in place. Soften that glue, it'll just make removing the bridge a lot easier. You can buy and use heating blankets that sit on the top of the bridge, fix them in place and just walk away for 10 minutes or so whilst it heats up the bridge and does its job. I haven't got one of those. I'm using a thermostatically controlled sealing iron. That does mean I just need to hold it in place whilst the iron is heating up the bridge. So it's a bit tedious just holding it in place for 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. But it does allow me just to sort of feel how the bridge is heating up, and particularly allows me just to feel the surface around the bridge, because the last thing I want to do is to overheat the bridge so that heat is transferred too much onto the surface around the bridge, and worse still, just lift or damage the finish around the bridge. So I'm just going to put on the podcast and let this iron do its job. So that bridge was a bit of a struggle to get off, but it's reasonably clean. I started working from this corner, and what I'm trying to establish is, am I working with the grain or against the grain? So the grain pattern is either, probably easier to describe, going uphill or downhill. If I come in here and I'm working against the grain, my spatula is going to be taken down into the top, into the grain. And if I keep working that, it's going to tear out chunks of the top if I just keep progressing with that. But I could sense as I came in this area here that I was working with the grain, and as a consequence this area here is very clean. Now because this is a book match top, I knew that I could then come in from that corner on this side. But eventually you have to start working along the edge of the bridge, and where I've got tear out, there's a couple of places just there and a little bit there. That's because where I've gone in here working under the edge of the bridge, I'm now working against the grain. Against the grain that side, with the grain this side, and then the other half I'm working against the grain if I keep pushing along here. And it's the same here. I've worked against the grain as I've tucked my spatula under this edge of the bridge. The next thing I need to do is to plug the existing pinholes. Now I've looked at the bridge plate below and it's made of maple. The new pinholes will have to be drilled just a few millimeters back from the location of the existing holes. So therefore the stability and the hardness of the material I use for the plugs I think is really important in terms of getting a nice clean new pinhole. So therefore I'm going to use maple to plug these existing pinholes. The new bridge is a couple of millimeters wider than the original, deliberately so. So what I now need to do is just score around the bridge just to remove the excess to the finish, so that when the new bridge is glued in place it's sitting on bare wood and not the finish. And to do that I'm using a scalpel with a new sharp blade. The existing finish is very thin and quite brittle. I'm not sure what it is. It's definitely not some form of lacquer. He only did tell me what it is. It might be a French polish, but I'm having to be very careful so I don't sort of flake it off this side of my score line. The next job is to drill the new pinholes, and I've fixed a piece of wood under the bridge plate just to minimise the chance of the drill bit bursting through as it goes through the top, so we get hopefully some nice clean pinholes. So, change of approach. As I started to drill this first hole here, the drill bit started to wander. And I think that's because I'm drilling into a mixture of hardwood, which is the plugs, the inserts into the original holes, surrounded by the softwood. And so I've just changed my approach and drilled a number of small pilot holes, 1mm, then 2mm. So just checking that these holes are in the right place. Yes, they are. That's good. So I'm just going to increase the size of the drill bit, go through 2.5, 3mm up to 5mm. I think that's going to be more accurate. I think there is still a chance that some of these plug holes will fall away because I'm drilling so close to the location of these plugs. But let's see how we get on. So this is 2.5. Incidentally, there's much less chance of bursting through the wood doing this way, increasing the size of the drill bit. So I'm going to get cleaner holes actually doing it this way. So that's the 2.5, so I can now move on to the 3mm. This is the jig that I'm using to route the saddle slot. I have a couple of adjustable fences, adjustable left and right, and a couple of stops so I can set maximum travel of the router to the ends of the saddle slot. And I'm using a 2.5mm spiral down bit. I'm not going to try and route across. I'm going to create a sort of series of holes as I sort of step across and then route across and join up those holes. The bridge has been sanded up to 600 grit, polished and given a coat of oil. Checking the location of the saddle, I'm happy that I've got that in exactly the right position. I was aiming for the front edge of the saddle, where the top E string crosses, to be at 632 millimeters, and the back edge of the saddle, where the bottom E crosses, to be at 636 millimeters. That's all correct. Now, because I'm using a 3mm wide saddle, and I probably won't be using the saddle that's in place at the moment, the width of the saddle just allows me to tweak the intonation point, the correct intonation point, once the strings are on. And then I can just refine the intonation point, which will be different for each string, just so the intonation for all strings is correct, properly in the right place, and the guitar will then play correctly in tune. So now let's glue this bridge in place. Okay, I think we are there and finished with this job. The string height has been set to what I know is the owner's preference, which is pretty low string height of sort of 1.2, 1.1 on the treble side, and 1.4, 1.5 on the bass side. So he hasn't got a strong attack, mostly finger picking. And I've had to tweak the saddle in terms of the intonation string point, particularly on the top E and also on the A and D string. So let's have a listen to what the strobe tuner is now saying about the intonation. So I've been doing this with a mixture of listening, using my ear and using the strobe tuner. So let's see how we've got on. Yeah, I think we've got there on this one. This has been a time-consuming job and therefore an expensive repair for the owner of this guitar. But he was frustrated, this guitar, which he loves in so many ways in terms of the way it sounds, the way it plays. He just was frustrated that the guitar was not playing properly in tune. And that was because this guitar, although beautifully made in many ways, the bridge was just set too far forward, and particularly the saddle just needed to be moved back a couple of millimeters. But we've seen from the strobe tuner and playing the guitar earlier that is now all corrected. Was it worth it? Well, I think this guitar is a very nice guitar. For a small body guitar, it feels bright and loud and resonant. I can sort of feel it coming through my chest. Yes, it's a nice guitar. So I do hope the owner of the guitar is going to be pleased with the work that I've done. But thanks for watching this Flame Guitars video.